Have you ever noticed the quiet, unsettling truth that lingers just beneath the surface of our lives? That the people who carve the deepest wounds into our hearts, who leave us feeling utterly undone, are often the very ones we find ourselves circling back to. The ones we can't seem to untangle ourselves from, no matter how much we yearn for freedom. It's a strange, almost cruel paradox, isn't it? A puzzle etched into the very fabric of human experience. We whisper our deepest desires into the silence of the night. Peace, boundless love, a haven of safety. We chase these ideals with every fiber of our being. But then, time and time again, like moths drawn to a dangerous flame, we find ourselves gravitating back to the very fire that singed our wings, that scorched our tender souls. To the voice that, with its sharp edges, consistently silenced our own. To the hands that, despite their initial promise, ultimately left us feeling hollow, diminished, truly empty. Why? Why? It's the question that echoes in the quiet hours, the one that haunts our reflections. Why do we relentlessly chase the very pain that shattered us into fragments? Why do we seek out the echoes of what broke us in the first place? No, this is not a sign of inherent weakness. This is not some inexplicable madness or a flaw in your character. This is profoundly human. And more profoundly, this is psychology. There's a precise, sometimes haunting term for this deeply entrenched pattern, for this gravitational pull toward familiar hurt. In the intricate tapestry of psychology, it's known as repetition compulsion. A phenomenon first meticulously explored by the pioneering mind of Sigmund Freud, it describes an almost irresistible, often entirely unconscious, urge to relive emotional trauma. Not, you see, to simply suffer again for the sake of suffering, that would be utterly senseless, but rather with a desperate, buried hope to finally master it. It's as if our deepest parts, the parts that hold our earliest wounds, are whispering a distorted promise. If I can just go through this again, if I can recreate the exact circumstances, but with a new ending, maybe, just maybe, this time it will conclude differently. This time I'll be stronger, smarter, more resilient. This time I'll win. Or perhaps another insidious thought takes root. If I can fix them, the one who caused the initial pain, if I can finally earn their love, their approval, their consistent presence, then by some magical transference, I can finally fix the gaping wound that lives inside of me. I can finally heal the original hurt. But the cruel truth, the harsh reality we must confront, is that trauma doesn't heal through mere repetition. It doesn't dissipate by reliving it in a new guise. Instead, tragically, it often deepens. And every single time we find ourselves returning to that same agonizing dynamic, every time we choose the familiar sting over the unfamiliar balm of peace, the original scar doesn't fade. No, it merely grows wider, more ingrained, becoming increasingly difficult to discern beneath the fragile skin of our present lives. It merges, becoming a part of us, rather than a wound we can simply observe and mend. So, the profound question remains, why? Why, for so many of us, does pain, in its raw, unvarnished form, somehow feel like home? Why does it possess a distorted sense of comfort, a peculiar kind of belonging? The answer, often, lies in the very beginning, because pain especially pain experienced during our formative, most vulnerable years, doesn't just hurt us, it becomes a blueprint. It lays down the earliest neural pathways for how we understand connection, how we perceive love, and how we navigate the world around us. Imagine this. If you grew up in an environment where love wasn't a gentle, steady stream, but a chaotic, unpredictable tide of inconsistency, if you learned subtly or overtly that genuine care always came with strings attached, that it morphed into a suffocating blanket of control, if attention, that most vital of human needs, could only be secured by walking on eggshells, by constantly anticipating the next outburst, the next disappointment, then your intricate nervous system, in its brilliant attempt to keep you safe, wired itself around that specific, distorted version of love. It adapted. It learned. Even if that adaptation was rooted in profound hurt, even if every fiber of your being screamed against it, your system recognized it as the established norm. So, what happens when someone finally enters your life who offers something radically different? Someone who embodies stability, who radiates genuine calmness, who provides the unwavering peace you've always craved. It feels foreign, unsettling, almost untrustworthy. And yes, sometimes in its quiet consistency, it can even feel surprisingly boring. Not because it inherently is boring or untrustworthy, but because your very body, your cellular memory, was rigorously trained to recognize chaos as the default state of normal. It was conditioned to interpret a certain level of pain as a prerequisite for intimacy, and to equate withholding, emotional unavailability, or a constant struggle with a perverse sense of safety because, at least in that struggle, you knew the rules of engagement. The unknown of true peace feels more dangerous than the known of painful familiarity. Let me share a story with you, a mosaic of countless experiences embodying this very pattern. Let's call her Lena. Lena's early world was shaped by the absence and unpredictable presence of her father. He was rarely home, his physical presence a fleeting shadow, and when he was there, his voice often carried the sharp sting of criticism, a dismissive tone that seemed to cut her down, even when she tried her absolute best, even when she did things perfectly right. From a tender age, Lena absorbed a harsh, unspoken lesson. Love, or at least the attention that felt like love, had to be painfully earned. It was a currency exchanged for enduring discomfort, for navigating a minefield of unpredictable emotional landmines. Years later, as a young woman yearning for connection, Lena found herself drawn, almost magnetically, to a man who mirrored that early dynamic with chilling precision. He rarely returned her calls, leaving her adrift in a sea of anxious uncertainty. He reveled in making her second-guess his affection, forcing her into a constant state of emotional guesswork. And with every attempt she made to articulate her needs, to voice her fragile hopes, he would skillfully deflect, blame, and diminish her. And even though Lena's nights were often punctuated by silent tears, hot against her pillow, even though her soul ached with a loneliness deeper than any she had ever known, she stayed. She clung on, sometimes with desperate, white-knuckled resolve. Why? The question demands an answer. Because in those moments of enduring, in those cycles of hurt and fleeting hope, her inner child, the unhealed part of her, still clung to that deeply ingrained belief: if I can just make him stay, if I can just be good enough, patient enough, perfect enough to earn his consistent love, then maybe finally I'll be truly worthy of love, worthy of belonging. That, my friends, is the insidious loop. That's the silent, relentless turning of the wheel. That is repetition compulsion in its most heart-wrenching motion. And the rabbit hole descends even deeper, because over extended periods in these very specific, volatile dynamics, the very experience of pain in a twisted psychological sense can become addictive. We're talking here about trauma bonds. These aren't formed in moments of pure, unadulterated cruelty, but in a cunning, almost manipulative dance where moments of intense emotional abuse, neglect, or profound invalidation are meticulously interspersed with small, carefully timed doses of affection, apology, or fleeting kindness. Perhaps it's a sudden, heartfelt apology after days of silence, a grand, unexpected gesture or gift following a particularly devastating argument, or a single, blissful, good day that materializes after 10 agonizingly bad ones, dangling like a mirage in the desert of despair. And that relentless chase, that desperate pursuit of a fleeting illusion, that, heartbreakingly, becomes our very prison. It creates a powerful, almost unbreakable energetic leash. Understand this crucial distinction. It's often not the person we're addicted to, not their inherent qualities, but rather the pattern they embody, a pattern that, tragically, resonates with our deepest unhealed wounds. It's the familiar rhythm of the chase, the roller coaster of hope and despair that becomes our involuntary drug. And the rabbit hole descends even deeper. Because over extended periods, in these very specific volatile dynamics, the very experience of pain, in a twisted psychological sense, can become addictive. We're talking here about trauma bonds. These aren't formed in moments of pure, unadulterated cruelty, but in a cunning, almost manipulative dance, where moments of intense emotional abuse, neglect, or profound invalidation are meticulously interspersed with small, carefully timed doses of affection, apology, or fleeting kindness. Perhaps it's a sudden, heartfelt apology after days of silence, a grand, unexpected gesture or gift following a particularly devastating argument, or a single, blissful, good day that materializes after 10 agonizingly bad ones, dangling like a mirage in the desert of despair. This agonizing inconsistency, this cruel push and pull, doesn't just confuse, it triggers a powerful neurochemical response in the brain. It unleashes a flood of dopamine, the very same powerful chemical activated by the thrill of gambling, the rush of addiction, the consuming intensity of obsession. And so, without even realizing it, we begin chasing that elusive high. The high of, maybe this time it'll be different. The desperate, yearning hope that this one act of kindness will finally rewrite the entire painful narrative. And that relentless chase, that desperate pursuit of a fleeting illusion, that, heartbreakingly, becomes our very prison. It creates a powerful, almost unbreakable energetic leash. Understand this crucial distinction. It's often not the person we are addicted to, not their inherent qualities, but rather the pattern they embody, a pattern that tragically resonates with our deepest unhealed wounds. It's the familiar rhythm of the chase, the roller coaster of hope and despair that becomes our involuntary drug. And here, perhaps, is the most paradoxical and undeniably the hardest truth to fully absorb. When your internal system, your very being, has been meticulously trained and wired for the relentless, exhausting act of surviving chaos, then the quiet, steady, unwavering presence of healthy love can paradoxically, terrifyingly, feel like a profound danger. Consider this: a partner who doesn't resort to yelling, who communicates calmly, who doesn't explode in fits of rage. You might find yourself instinctively waiting, bracing yourself for the inevitable explosion you believe must be coming. The silence feels too loud, the calm too precarious. A friend who respects their own needs and gently but firmly sets clear, healthy boundaries, rather than seeing it as a sign of respect and self-worth, your wired system might interpret it as rejection, a direct abandonment, triggering the very fears of being left alone you tried so hard to avoid. And a life once bathed in the relentless drama, now filled with calm, quiet contentment, perhaps even a profound sense of peace, you might find yourself subtly, unconsciously, calling it boring. Why does this happen? Because your entire nervous system, from its earliest moments, was meticulously wired to stay perpetually alert, to be constantly vigilant, to be ready to survive. It learned that safety lay in anticipating the next crisis, in navigating the emotional storms. It literally doesn't recognize peace as a safe state, because it never truly learned in its formative years what genuine, unwavering peace felt like within the context of connection. It's a foreign language it hasn't been taught to speak. And so, often unconsciously, sometimes overtly, you might find yourself pushing that true peace away, sabotaging the very relationships that offer genuine healing, or, in a desperate flight from the unfamiliar comfort, simply running back to the chaotic familiarity that, despite its pain, feels like the only emotional terrain you truly know. But here, amongst the shadows of these difficult truths, lies the most profoundly beautiful truth of all, the promise that resonates deep within us. Your magnificent brain, that intricate, adaptable organ, and your resilient heart, that boundless wellspring of empathy and growth, can be slowly, patiently, lovingly rewired. This transformation unfolds through conscious awareness. It blossoms through unwavering patience with yourself, and it is nurtured, profoundly, through the steady, unwavering light of self-compassion. The crucial first step, the very ignition point, is often the simplest yet most challenging: to recognize the pattern, to see it not as a judgment, but as an observation. Ask yourself, with gentle curiosity, in the quiet moments, do I consistently confuse the frantic flutter of anxiety with the exciting spark of true chemistry? Do I mistake the chaotic dance of inconsistency for the alluring depth of a profound connection? And perhaps the most telling question of all, do I feel a strange, almost unsettling boredom around people who consistently make me feel genuinely, reliably safe. Once you begin to see these patterns, truly see them, then you can begin the courageous, deliberate act of choosing peace, even if, at first, it feels utterly awkward, disorienting, even vaguely unsettling. Sit with the profound discomfort of being loved gently, consistently, without having to earn it. Allow people to stay, to offer their unwavering presence, even when a deep, old part of you whispers that you don't deserve it. Consciously lean into and trust the profound quiet of calmness. Begin the sacred journey of truly learning deep in your bones that authentic, lasting love doesn't and should not have to hurt. This profound journey of healing, this rewriting of old scripts, also invariably ushers in another crucial, often overlooked, and deeply human experience: grief. You may find yourself grieving the very person or people who simply couldn't or wouldn't love you in the whole, healthy way you deserved. This grief is valid, a quiet farewell to a hope unfulfilled. You will undoubtedly grieve the version of yourself, that tireless, dedicated part who kept chasing them, kept investing in the illusion, kept believing that one more effort would finally yield a different outcome. Grieve for the energy, the time, the emotional currency spent in that difficult pursuit. And yes, you may grieve the precious years, the moments, the chapters of your life spent agonizingly trying to rewrite a painful story through someone else, desperately hoping their change would somehow magically mend your broken parts. But understand this with profound clarity. True healing is not about finally winning love, acceptance, or validation from the wrong people. That is a game designed to keep you trapped. No. Healing, true, transformative healing, is about turning that powerful, boundless wellspring of love, the love you poured out so freely, so generously, and directing it with fierce intention and gentle grace back towards yourself. It's about learning, slowly, deliberately, and with immense compassion, that true love is not a prize to be won through enduring pain. It is not something you must earn through suffering or sacrifice. Love just is. It simply exists. It's an inherent right, a boundless presence that awaits when you finally stop chasing the echoes of what once broke you. So, if you find yourself today, in this very moment, recognizing that familiar pull, that subtle, almost gravitational tug back towards the pain that once fractured you, I invite you gently to simply pause, to take a slow, deliberate breath. And in that stillness, in that quiet, sacred space, to ask your inner child, that tender, vulnerable part of you that still remembers the original wound, a single profound question.